Guys, welcome to Sunday Night Live on the Toilets to Titles Network. I'm your host, Jason, and with me is some familiar faces. I'm going to go ahead and call out Rich here off to my right, your left. Rich has been out for a couple weeks. He had his daughter's birthday, his 24th, I believe, wedding anniversary, some big milestones in the Frito Bandito household. Rich, welcome back to the podcast.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you for letting me jump off for a little bit to take care of some family things. My oldest one birthday. No, actually, my middle one's birthday, and then me and my wife's anniversary, and then in 2 weeks, my oldest one is getting married and stuff like that. So it's a hectic month for us. So,
well, look, you left, you came back. We got a new name. It's great.
Yeah, it's nice. That Sunday Night Live.
Sunday, right? Listen, this is one late night show not affected by the writer strike. Below me here, you know him, you love him. He hosts the New York Giants Corner on the Toilets Titles Network. It's Joe Clark. Joe, welcome to Sunday Night Live.
Yeah, guys, great to see you again. Great to be here, and always happy to talk NFL football, especially amongst my great friends here at Toilets to Titles on Sunday Night Live.
Joe, I don't know, man. Like, are you 100% New York? You got the hat on. You're repping your show on our show. It's a good thing, man.
Absolutely. You got to market wherever you go. You got to do the marketing.
Look, and Frito showing off his shirt. Look, I wanted to wear a shirt. I got Ninja Turtles. That doesn't count.
I forgot to wear a 12 title shirt.
and then you got Justin down there, bottom corner opposite of me. He's not repping a Colts show. He's repping the title show, the Toilets Title Show on Tuesday nights. Justin, welcome back to Sunday Night Live. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm hoping that maybe midsummer or so we might be throwing a Colts show on the network. So you may have casually teased something. So we'll see.
I mean, look, I appreciate that, but what are you trying to do? Bring our viewers down a peg?
Okay, yeah. That's fair. That's fair game right now.
Why do you think we don't do a Bucs show? We don't want negative viewers.
Yeah, start losing
or a Raiders show.
Well, so
unless I can get Mike Allstott on, right?
Oh, absolutely. If we can get that's happening. So as these guys previewed, we are going to be talking NFL. There was not a lot of news today, or this week in the NFL. So we're going to be talking about coaches in the hot seat. But before we do that, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping here. So I talked about a couple of the shows that we do here at Toilets Titles. I want you to check out everything that Toilets Titles is doing, from articles to podcasts to live videos like this one, YouTube shorts. The Toilets Titles team always has something going on. We are doing mock drafts with George. I think he's doing a Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. We have College Football Nation Monday night. We have College Football Nation on Monday night. Our title show on Tuesdays. New York Giants Corner with Joe's. Usually on Wednesdays, I think Joe's doing a little something different, and I'll let him talk about that in a minute. We've got On the Clock Thursdays, P2P on Fridays, the Cowboys show Sunday morning with Coach, and we've got this show here. You can find us on our YouTube channel to watch all the videos. You go to toiletstitles.com, find all our articles, become a member of our Patreon at patreon.com/toiletstitles. We've got $3 a month, $5 a month, $7.50 a month, a bunch of different things all throughout. $5 a month gets you an automatic spot in our listener league, and $3 a month gets you into our Gilded Chat. And our Gilded Chat has been lively, so come in, talk football with a bunch of people that love football. Joe, I know you're doing something a little bit different with your show this week. If you want to talk about that, and then we'll get on to our topic.
Yeah, like Jason had mentioned, I normally do my New York Giants Corner show around 8:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Wednesday nights. But with the draft having just ended, instead of doing like a standard half hour to an hour show discussing the each of the picks, I decided just to do 10-minute segments and kind of space them out, where I already dropped my Deontay Banks video a few days ago. John Michael Schmitz, I'm dropping. He was the second round pick. I'm doing that tomorrow. It's going to be 10 minutes. A day or two after that, I'm going to drop Jalen Hyatt. And then for the final one, I'm just going to do like, the back end of the draft picks for the Giants, as well as maybe like one undrafted free agent. And just try to keep them like 10 minutes space out, because this is a difficult time of the year to create content. So I figured I'd space them out, and at the same time, be able to keep the viewers, their attention span. 10, 12-minute videos, can sometimes be better than, half hour, 60 minutes.
Well, so one of the reasons I wanted to highlight that is because the team here at Toilets Titles, leadership coach Justin, Joe, guys are always thinking about what's best for the viewers and how we can change what we're doing, including the picture of making me real big. What we're doing to be what's best for the viewer. Look, if we're in a slow section of NFL news, NFL time, we're going to break it up for you, and we're going to give you like some focus topics like we are tonight, like Joe did with his New York Giants show. We're not going to get stagnant for sure. So I do want to point out that we've got a wife here. Lori wants a T2T wives chat. And then
I like it.
I do as well. Justin is asking if he's freezing real bad, but I can't tell until you talk, Justin, and that's a little behind the scenes for you.
Well, I feel like maybe it might have caught up, but literally for the last 3 minutes, my live timer has been set on 3 minutes. So I think we're caught up now, though.
You very much are caught up now.
If it starts to freeze up really bad again, I'm probably just going to dip out, though, just so you know.
All right. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take me off spotlight. Makes me uncomfortable. And then we're going to get right into our topic about coaches on the hot seat. I got a list of 5 coaches here. I know a couple of these guys have an idea of some guys I don't have on this list. There's one in particular that I want to get to. Hopefully Justin doesn't dip out, but we can talk about it if he does. What we're going to do is I'm going to talk about each of the coach. We'll decide whether he deserves to be on the hot seat or not, and then we'll take a vote, because I want to keep track of this for the end of the year. See who was right and who was wrong on whether the guy will or won't be fired at the end of the year.
So is this essentially just a few more bathroom board bets? Is that what this is?
Probably.
All right. I like that.
It's a way to get you guys on record.
There we go.
I tried to get Coach on record on one of them, and he gave me 50-50. I don't think that counts. All right. We're going to jump right into this, guys. All right. First guy I have on the hot seat is Dennis Allen with the New Orleans Saints. Allen is a longtime coach for the Saints. It's actually this is his second stint with the Saints, first time as head coach. He was named defensive coordinator under Sean Payton in 2016 and was a natural selection to take over for Payton when Payton retired. In his first year, the New Orleans Saints led an often injured Saints to a 7-10 record in a weak NFC South. The Saints brought in Derek Carr to play QB this offseason to replace a terrible Andy Dalton. It should be an improvement at quarterback play. The Saints saw this last season, but they do face uncertainty with Alvin Kamara's availability, as he was caught on camera committing assault in Vegas. Given the state of injuries last year, Michael Thomas, Winston, Landry, etc., is it fair to put Dennis Allen on the hot seat this season? And I'm going to start with Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. I think bringing on the huge investment in and I thought it was a good investment in bringing on the quarterback Derek Carr. It's been a poor previous 2 years probably underperforming. I realize Drew Brees not being there is a huge hit. Future Hall of Famer. He knew that offense like the back of his hand. So that was a huge hit. But I think many of the fans had higher expectations for the Saints than I did over the previous 2 seasons. But now that they have Carr, the expectations are going to be there. They've invested some resources, good resources, into rebuilding that offense. And so I think it is going to be. He's going to have to prove himself this year, I believe, and I think he will be on the hot seat. Not as much as someone else we're going to get to, but he's going to be on the hot seat.
Well, and I think the expectations in a bad NFC South is that the Saints have the ability to take this one, especially because they have on paper, what's the best quarterback in the division. I'm going to go to Frito next because we did talk about Derek Carr, and that's somebody that Rich, you know very well because you're an Oakland fan. What are your thoughts on Carr taking over for the Saints there in New Orleans?
So it was a great move by them. I think you could say Dennis Allen is on the hot seat, but he's going to take himself pretty much off the hot seat after this season. And it's not by the fact of maybe what he's doing or what they're doing. It's just the division that they're in. Okay, so you kind of let off with it and everything. You know, you got Tampa, they're fixing to have to go through and everything. You got Atlanta. Atlanta made a lot of great moves and everything. We'll have to see. Maybe that might be their competition and everything. But I think with Dennis Allen bringing in Derek Carr, and then Derek Carr, he's already started bringing in some of the players that he's played with, teammates and everything. Abraham, they brought in the receiver. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But I think in this situation, their defense and QB play is going to keep them, if Michael Thomas is healthy too. You got to think about that. They also brought in Jamal Williams. Even if something happens to Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams is going to step in and do what Alvin Kamara does to a certain degree and everything, because he does catch balls out of the backfield. He does run the ball very well and everything. Great personality for their locker room. I don't want to say he is on the hot seat, but if he is, he's taking himself off. I don't see how they do not win this division.
Justin, do you tend to agree there? Are they going to win this division?
I don't know about winning the division necessarily, because I'm kind of intrigued with the rebuild in Carolina. I'm kind of intrigued to see how all that's going to play out. But I don't think I'm deep enough into this off season just yet to be able to make that prediction for sure. But I do tend to agree that I don't think he's going to be on the hot seat this coming season. I think, just like Rich said, he'll be taking himself off. He's there rightfully so right now, but I think they also kind of brought him in under the understanding that they knew in a way that they were going to be kind of bad as well, especially with going into the season without Michael Thomas and having so many question marks at the quarterback spot. There were high expectations for him, but then they had more injuries as the season began. I mean, at the end of the day, he still pulled out 7 wins somehow with that squad. And again, a lot of that had to do with the division. I get it, but he pulled out 7 wins on a really bad team. And I feel like anything better than that probably keeps his job. And I feel pretty strongly that he'll probably get better than that, especially just like Rich said, if Michael Thomas is healthy. But guys, if Michael Thomas isn't healthy at this point, then we can officially say that the injury that he sustained was a leg amputation. I don't see what else could be holding him back this long. Like that, he's got to be ready to go for week 1.
Well,
that
look,
guy's not even on my radar anymore. Michael Thomas.
Yeah.
No. Well, and they also drafted a running back in Kendre Miller.
Mm-hmm.
And they're saying they're expecting big things out of him, potential Kamara things out of him. I guess everybody's saying that out of camp right now. You know, everybody's excited with their rookie pick, so we don't know how much of that is coach speak, right? But the other thing I did want to mention here is the interesting idea that they played Andy Dalton for most of the season, even though Jameis Winston was healthy towards the end of the year. You guys think that was a GM decision or a coach decision or both?
I think Jameis Winston spoke for himself on that one. I've never been a big believer in the guy.
Joe?
Yeah, I mean, Jameis Winston, I mean, listen, you were a good – I had hopes for that guy that, you know, being in New Orleans would rejuvenate his career, and Sean Payton, and it didn't happen. So, like you had said earlier, like I think there was an understanding that, hey, Dennis, come be be our head coach, and we'll see how it goes. But there's a chance here this team is not going to be good, and hence this rebuild they're going through.
All right, guys, it's time to take a vote. I think I might be the only one who says I do think he's going to get fired. So, Frito, fired at the end of the year?
No, he'll be staying in.
Okay, we're going to do thumbs up for staying and thumbs down for fired on 3. 1, 2, 3. We'll just do it that way. And
But with a
Justin's
caveat, wait a second. It depends how the season goes. If they're at least middling, I think he stays. You got to see what, but if it's like if people are healthy and they play poorly, I would say he's going to go.
well,
Depends on
Joe.
how well the team's going to.
We're making predictions. We're in the prediction business, Joe. So,
are you predicting that they're going to be middling?
Justin, are you
All
holding
right,
your thumb up?
I'll predict. I'll stick with my thumbs up.
okay, that sounds good. And Justin was a thumbs up. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna go on to the second coach in the NFC South, Todd Bowles, on this list. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Todd Bowles was named defensive coordinator under Bruce Arians in 2019 when Arians suddenly shifted to the front office in March of 2022. Todd Bowles was named head coach. With the change happening late into the offseason, Bowles had to keep the same coaching staff as Arians and was not able to put his stamp on leadership. After an 8-9 season and being bounced from the playoffs in the first round with Tom Brady, the Bucs go into this offseason picked to finish last in a bad NFC South. The Bucs have a new offensive coordinator in Dave Canales, who was the Seahawks quarterback coach last year. Guys, with the national media seeing the Bucs as a rebuild, the Bucs don't necessarily see themselves that way. Is it fair to have Bowles in his second season on the hot seat and fire him if it doesn't pan out?
Yeah, he's gone. Excuse me. And he's not gone for what he can do. It's just what's been given to him and not being able to turn it around as quick as they're going to want and everything. I mean, when you take over knowing that Tom Brady's last season, you don't got a good backup. You got Baker and stuff like that. Unless he turns around and becomes that number one pick that everybody thought he was going to be. Sorry, Jared. Just by no fault of his, he will not be here next season. Just didn't get a fair shake.
Joe, I see you smiling down there. What do you think?
Yeah, listen, it's not a great situation. And, last year, I mean, there was so much outside of Todd Bowles that was an issue. They had a lot of key injuries last year, Tampa Bay. But it felt like, and listen, you're closer to than I am, Jason, because you're a Buccaneers fan, but it definitely felt like there was, underperformance that went on. And you're not having Brady there, like it's kind of like setting up, I think, they still have a lot of talent. They still have a lot of talent. But it's kind of setting up a recipe of, disaster without Brady being there. And, it's Bowles' second stint, as a head coach too. And hey, listen, if they perform well, and it is a weak division, if they win the division again and make it into the playoffs, I think that'll be good enough, for them to go. And they still have, I think, as much talent as anyone in that division. But we'll see. I'm not a huge Todd Bowles fan. It wasn't the direction I thought they should have went when with head coach anyway when Arians retired. But yeah, I think I agree with Rich. I have a feeling things aren't gonna go too well, and he's gonna be gone at the end of the season.
Justin, thoughts on Todd Bowles?
Yeah, I think he stays. I think Arians really likes him for whatever reason, and Arians knows that he still kind of is in control and in power by having him as the head coach. So Arians can still pull the puppet strings, but without having all of the stress of the head coach position. So which is good for his heart, by the way. But I feel like the Glazer family. Before I talk about the Glazers, the people of Tampa are just used to this team being bad. Am I right, Jason?
Oh yeah. We're used to it, and in the few aberrations of being good, we don't know how to handle it.
Right. So this is nothing new. Like this is like the norm. So I feel like they brought him in. The Glazer family sold their souls for Tom Brady for the Super Bowl, and it worked. Great for them. Whatever. They're already millionaires, so they were probably already not in a good place anyway. But they've sold their souls to get that Super Bowl, and it worked out great for them. And now it's whatever. We're good for a while. So I don't think they're going to deal with the headaches and the frustrations of hiring a new coach whenever they've got one that is a perfectly good figurehead right now for what they play for in Tampa.
Jason, before you take over on this aspect, I want to set you up. Okay, so does Tampa Bay tank for Caleb, and understanding that, and let Todd Bowles know, hey, this is what we're doing. We're going to go for this guy. Or do they tank for him and say, hey, let's get a whole new regime, someone that could coach to tank, Caleb's kind of prospect?
I think the tough part about tanking is the division they play in. If you play in the NFC South, you're probably guaranteed a minimum of 4 wins, right? You're going to beat the other teams in your division probably once each. So it's tough. It's tough to be in that position when there's other teams that are going to be bad and playing in better divisions. We can throw the Commanders out there who play in a division with 3 really good teams. They don't have some easy wins on their schedule. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is the Buccaneers, while the national media will tell you the Buccaneers are in a full rebuild, the Buccaneers would tell you we're not. They like K-Dot, and they still have Chris Godwin. They still have Mike Evans. Their offensive line, while it's not great, it's being rebuilt. They're getting Ryan Jensen back. They drafted Cody Mock because he's a position in need. They're moving Wirfs, who's a superstar, from the right side to the left side. That should shore up a lot of the problems they had last year in offensive line. The Buccaneers would tell you, especially this head coach would tell you, that Byron Leftwich was one of the biggest issues last year, which is why they got rid of him. They're the little known secret, because the Tampa Bay media were on Leftwich getting fired after the Dallas Cowboys game, or not the Cowboys game. I forget which game. It's week 15. The rumors were everybody knew Leftwich was out the door in the offseason. That he didn't have any friends left in the building besides Bruce Arians. And the only reason he was probably there in the start is because Todd Bowles couldn't replace the coach because he got named head coach in March instead of January, like most new head coaches. He didn't get to pick his staff. The talk about the offense for the Bucs last year was basically that over the last several years, the scheme wasn't good. They just outperformed the defense. They had Tom Brady, they had Mike Evans, they had Chris Godwin. These guys weren't open, but what they were is good. And when they played well, it worked well. And when they didn't play perfectly, it looked terrible. The new offensive coordinator, Dave Canales, he's a quarterbacks coach out of Seattle. He's the guy who kind of turned Geno Smith around. And his philosophy is one I like for Baker Mayfield. His philosophy is, if my quarterback can't do it well, I'm not going to ask my quarterback to do it. Now, what does that mean for Baker Mayfield? Probably not going to do a lot of things. Right? But you're not going to put too much on his plate that he can't handle. So they're going to roll him out. They're going to make the game easier for him. But he's got better weapons in Tampa than he's probably ever had. Certainly better than he had for the Browns when OBJ wasn't very good, and then even before that. So especially when he was at the Panthers, right? So like he's got a second or a third or fourth chance or whatever it is to be okay. In the South, they have a shot. And then, when the media is saying they're in a rebuild mode, if they were in a rebuild mode, they wouldn't have given Levante David a 1-year contract. They probably wouldn't have signed Davis to another big deal. They likely would have traded either Godwin or Evans to get some cap relief and get some picks back. Like, there's a lot of things that this team has done to me that says we're not rebuilding, we're reloading. The quarterback is a big issue. It is, but I'm hoping as a Buccaneers fan that with all of that said, that they'll get better play out of Baker than he's gotten before, kind of like Canales got out of Geno Smith. So that's what I'm looking at. And again, I think both of these coaches that we've talked about have a chance of sticking around because they can be decent in a bad NFC South. And while that decent is never going to make them Super Bowl contenders, it also may save the job for these two guys going forward.
Hey, just real quick, I just want to give a shout out to Shay. Shay tweeted that in our chat right now, and Shay has started a new program. It's actually this Wednesday. He's the host of our new Rams show called Ramsaholic. So obviously it's an LA Rams centric show, and it's First episode is releasing Wednesday morning, I believe, at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Could be noon. Don't quote me just yet. I got to double check the schedule, but I'm in charge of the release.
Well,
we'll tweet it.
That's great, Joe. And remind me to add that to my my notes at the beginning of the show, so
Yeah,
I can mention that going on. And Shay jumps in saying Baker could get them into the playoffs. Absolutely, especially in the NFC South. Like, look, good enough to get into the playoffs because of the NFC South, sure. Good enough to go anywhere after that, absolutely not. So
yeah, I'm intrigued to see how Baker, does. I haven't completely given up on Baker. Maybe I'm insane, but or maybe I'm insane and right anyway. But both can be true. But I have to say, like, I'm intrigued. Like, Cleveland's situation was bad. He went to Panthers, which is bad, Matt Rule, and hopefully this head coach in Tampa Bay, with the talent that he's going to have around him, that could totally revitalize him. But is Baker written in stone as a starter, or is there a competition with Trask at all?
There's a competition for sure with Trask. I think I've seen enough out of Trask to say it's not that much of a competition. But we'd be interested to see. Like, I think if it was a competition that was going to bear any fruit, we would have seen him play a little bit more in the last preseason, because they already knew what they had with Gabbert, but I think they saw what they had in Trask and didn't like it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I hope Trask proves me wrong, because I don't like a team that I root for wasting second round picks, but the Bucs are pretty good at wasting those picks. So, and then Shay also, and I do appreciate this, Shay. He did well for LA, and his best wide receiver was Van Jefferson. Now Evans and Godwin. O-line is sus, but not as bad as the Rams. Plus, he's mobile.
Yeah.
Yep. And I agree. Like, he could be good. Okay. So we're going to we got onto Baker Mayfield here, but a lot of times quarterback is tied to the head coaching position. So it's good to talk about the quarterbacks for these guys. Let's take a vote, up or down. Thumbs up if we're keeping him. Thumbs down if we're getting rid of him. Let's do this. Todd Bowles. All right. Justin and I are up. Frito and Joe are down. We'll keep track of this. In a case Justin freezes, I like that his thumb's still up. We're going to move on to our third coach in the 5 we're doing tonight. The third one is a coach special, Mike McCarthy, Dallas Cowboys head coach. He joined the Cowboys as head coach in 2020 after leaving the Green Bay Packers. In the Cowboys' first season, they finished 6-10, but the following 2 seasons under Mike McCarthy, the Cowboys finished 12-5. Sounds funny to have a head coach in the hot seat who's shown progress in his first 3 seasons. However, one playoff win in those 2 winning years is not enough to keep Jerry Jones happy. Dallas has parted ways with 4-year offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, putting added pressure on Mike McCarthy because he's now calling the plays. With multiple 12-win seasons in the books, is it now fair to have Mike McCarthy on this list? And Justin, I'm going to start with you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. Because I'm froze on my screen. I didn't know if my mic was okay. Anyhow, so the way I look at this is it's pretty simple, really. I feel like Jerry Jones, the older that he's getting, the more he does not want to be proven wrong. And not that Mike McCarthy necessarily is the wrong answer there to begin with, especially 3 years ago when he hired him. This is going to be his 4th season. He held on to Jason Garrett for 10 seasons. I mean, and he really had absolutely no playoff wins at all, I don't believe, in his 10 years. If he did, there was very minimal playoff success. And then Mike McCarthy comes in, and he's kind of much the same, except he's only had 3 years. So I feel like even if he's wrong here and Mike McCarthy does continue to give less than stellar performances, and the Cowboys fan base even starts to turn against him, I feel like he's still going to hang on to him for a couple more seasons, because he's just that kind of man that does not want to be proven wrong. So, that's kind of how I view it. And plus, I kind of like Mike McCarthy, and I get sometimes I don't see what a lot of the Cowboys fans sees, and I listen to Coach, and I hear his complaints, and sometimes I think, man, that kind of makes sense. Maybe he should have taken this different route, this different avenue. So maybe I'm looking at it from an outsider's viewpoint, but as an outsider to the Cowboys organization, I got to say he's got to stick around at least for a couple more seasons.
Yeah, and I talked to Coach about this because I wanted to get his vote, and Coach said it for him it's 50-50, so no real vote from Coach there. That's fine. But Joe, I know you've probably followed the Cowboys of the four of us the closest because they're in division. So I'll let you talk about them next. But what do you think about Mike McCarthy taking over play calling duties and getting rid of Kellen Moore? Now, Kellen had some of the best offenses in the NFL over the last few years. So getting rid of him to me seemed like a scapegoat. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think you listen to Coach. I know he was on board getting rid of Kellen Moore, as far as I recall. I think, as far as I know, Dallas fans were kind of done with Kellen Moore. To be honest, he was a hot name up until fairly recently. But I think Dallas fans had already soured on him, and him being gone wasn't a surprise. Listen, Mike McCarthy, I'm pretty sure that throughout the majority of his Packers career as head coach, he was calling the plays, so he's done it before. Not every coach could done it, but he's done it, and obviously, did it at a high level with Green Bay. They had a lot of success. They did win a Super Bowl. People felt like the team maybe with Aaron Rodgers should have won more than one, but whatever. They're always in the playoffs. They were always 13-3 under McCarthy, and they've been like that for the most part post McCarthy as well. But his teams have always won a lot of games. For me myself, unless Dallas is too talented to have unless barring injury, they're just too talented of a team to slide back this year. They're like the Eagles in that maybe no team is as stacked as the Eagles, but they're really deep. They don't have any holes. They really don't have any holes. And so, they've got a lot of talent on offense. They've got better and better defense every single year. They made some really nice additions in the offseason. So, yeah, they need more playoff success. You got to recognize too. And I think Jerry Jones is actually reasonable in that. And maybe with Garrett, we saw that he was too patient or too willing to try to be proven right, possibly. But last year when they lost to the 49ers, 49ers, Eagles, and Cowboys were all three very, very good teams. And Dak, I think, that was an anomaly. That wasn't a Dak type season. I don't think he's regressing. I think it was just whatever injuries, whatever. It was no guarantee they were going to beat the 49ers anyway. And if they went against the Eagles, there's no guarantee they were going to beat the Eagles too. Those are very talented teams they had to go up against. So I think McCarthy's done a very good job. Listen, if they have some sort of 7-10 season, and injuries can't explain it, then we'll be talking about him being fired. But I just don't see that happening. I don't see them having less than 12 wins going into the playoffs. And if they're healthy and if Dak is Dak, they could make it to the Super Bowl. They could. So I think he's going to be around.
Frito, jump in here.
Yeah, so obviously in a division where you got the Philadelphia with everything they've been doing and stuff like that, they're going to be playing second fiddle. I think they're going to keep with the consistent record that they've been having. They're going to have a great record and everything. I just think that's what's going to be their nemesis. And I think the only way he does keep his job is with a playoff win. If he goes in and gets a playoff win, I think he's fine. I think he's going to hold his job. Now, say this season goes where the defense is what really is doing it for them, which I could see that being. Joe said it. The offense is they got great weapons on the offense and everything, but if, say, for example, it just doesn't work, it doesn't mesh right or something like that, the defense carries them to a good record, but the offense does. I think that kind of puts it like Dan Quinn in a bug in the ear of, you know what, if we don't move forward with McCarthy, I got Dan Quinn that could take him as a successor, and we'll just bring in another offensive coordinator to take over or something like that. I worry with him taking over as an offensive coordinator. That's what maybe puts him on the chopping block, depending on how they do.
Yeah, I think we talk about McCarthy with the Packers, Joe, you mentioned it. For me, if I remember right, what bounced McCarthy out with the Packers is that Aaron Rodgers said he didn't like the plays that got called. he often would change them in the huddle. He'd often change them at the line of scrimmage because,
Yeah.
it was too vanilla, too predictable. I worry about that for Mike McCarthy with the Cowboys. He's already got a lot to deal with. The other thing here, and I know we're saying the Cowboys don't have a lot of holes, and I think depth is a problem. Running back depth, for example, Tony Pollard seems to be great, but we haven't seen him carry a full workload by himself. And right now, Deuce Vaughn is the backup. You've got Ronald Jones there. Running back depth is an issue, though. There's talk about them possibly opening the door to Zeke coming back, and I think that's probably in a more reduced role. I think that's probably a good thing looking at their depth. Kareem Hunt's out there. Go get him. Tight end, they're going to be relying on a rookie this year. That's not a great thing for them. Defense is great. I do worry about Mike McCarthy and his play calls, just based off what we've seen in past years from Mike McCarthy. And again, while Kellen Moore, you've seen a lot of like Coach, for example, and he's probably right that he was done with him. That offense was good based off NFL standards, right? Ranked in the top half of each year. 2 years ago was the number one producing offense in the league. So to me, it felt like a scapegoat. And I like Lori's comments, but because we're a PG show, I'm not going to put it up. It's not that bad, but it's just not good.
Save that for the T2T wives chat.
Exactly right. So so that's my thoughts on it. I do think Jerry Jones has become more patient over the years. You can see that, like you guys talked about with Garrett, but I also know that there's a short window in the NFL for teams being good, and this team is good. And if they don't make it deeper into the playoffs, I think eventually he'll get tired, and he'll call for McCarthy's head. So I am going to take a vote now. Thumbs up if he's staying, thumbs down if he's going. So me and Rich, if you're listening later at home, me and Rich are saying that he's going, and then Joe and Justin say he's staying. All right. So that is the third coach we got on here. The fourth coach, and it seems like we're keeping coaches from the same divisions here. My next coach is also from the NFC East. It's Ron Rivera with the Washington Commanders. He's been the head coach with the Commanders since 2020. During that time period, they are a 22-27-1. He is the anti-Mike McCarthy, and then his first season he had a winning record, and then following those, he's had two really bad seasons. They were 7-5-1 and in control of their own destiny for the playoffs last season before falling to the 8-1. Now, with the Eagles being the favorite in the NFC, and the Cowboys always having high expectations, and the Giants improving so dramatically under Brian Daboll, Commanders are slated for fourth in the East, and their starting quarterback is Sam Howell. He has limited playing time under his belt, and they have a backup of Jacoby Brissett if Howell can't get it done. Guys, how much leeway do you think Rivera gets here, especially considering the team's about to be sold and the leadership's going to want to need that steady hand that Ron Rivera's brought to the team? Even though it hasn't been winning, it's changed the culture for the Commanders, who desperately needed a culture change. Does that buy him some time? Does that give him some leeway? Joe, again, it's NFC East, so I'm going to start with you.
That's okay. I think so. Like you just pointed out, Ron Rivera is considered very important in Washington for bringing, some class, stability, to that organization that's kind of became a clown show for a long time under owner Dan Snyder. And Ron Rivera has a lot of gravitas and credibility behind him, and he is a good head coach. And I think the main thing has been during his tenure at Washington was is the quarterback situation. It's been they clearly have not had like a QB1 there. There's really been very little stability. Even when they've got it rolling the same guy out, he's either not good or it's just guys they're just rotating in and out. I am intrigued by. I know this isn't about quarterbacks, but I have to say I'm really intrigued by Sam Howell to see how he does on a Washington team offense that actually has some pretty good weapons, in my opinion. So I am intrigued, and people just real quick, like his next to last season at UNC, he was very good, and he was considered possibly the top quarterback heading into the following draft class in college football. But he had lost like his two top running backs and his two wide receivers in the same year in the draft, and in his final year at UNC, he definitely took a dip, and so he made it to like the third round where Washington drafted him. I'm intrigued to see what Coach Rivera does with Howell and how he comes along. So I definitely have my eye on Howell, but I think Rivera will be around for next year, even if there's new ownership. I think it would be a smart move.
Yeah, I think they're slated to be bad because the division is actually very good. But they do have some weapons on offense. They didn't do much as far as running backs go this offseason, but Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel is a solid wide receiver core. Logan Thomas, when healthy, is a very good tight end. Their offense could be good, but Rivera is a defensive head coach, and that's where they kind of fell off drastically last year, to the point where there were rumors during the draft of them trading some of their big named offensive or defensive linemen. Frito, I see you nodding your head there. What do you think the Redskins, the Commanders need to do in order to keep Ron Rivera, given the fact that their record is likely not going to be good, and they're likely at best, let's say either the Cowboys or the Giants slide, like at best probably going to be third in this division, likely to be fourth, but at best the third in this division.
Yeah, I look, when new ownership comes in, as this is fixing to happen and everything, it's going to be a la Denver. They're just going to change everything up. You might as well start fresh. Go out there, try to make a splash with a good coach that they could bring in. I just don't see how they don't go that route if a new ownership takes over. You got Sam Howell, which ain't going to do. And you were talking about earlier, Chase Young. They were talking about trying to trade him during the draft and everything. And it's like, as soon as you hear that, I mean, it's like they're going to go in a rebuild mode and everything. And I see a la Denver. That's all I see when they do that. I don't know if there's a quarterback that they could go after, make a splash for as far as trades and everything, because maybe their record is going to be bad where they're the ones that are actually drafting Caleb. But I don't know. In my opinion, anytime new ownership takes over, I get what you guys are saying about trying to have someone there for Ron Rivera. I get that. I much respect him and everything. But I just don't see that happening. In this division, they ain't going to improve and everything. You got to make drastic changes to even compete in this division. And Sam Howell ain't going to do that. I'm with you, Joe. I'm intrigued to see what he does. I just don't see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Justin.
Sam Howell actually dropped a little bit further than you remember, Joe. He was the first pick in the 5th round.
Get out of here! Was he really?
Yeah, he dropped
I thought
that.
he was third round. Oh my gosh!
And I get
That's
what you're
crazy.
saying with his teammates getting hurt and at UNC and all that. But even with that, like it's all right. Bear with me. All right, you guys are going to want to shut off my screen after I say this, but Jacoby Brissett is actually the quarterback that they need for that team right now, and I think there's a really good chance he ends up coming in there to play, and not just because of the fact that the worse they do, the better their draft pick would be. I'm not just necessarily looking at it from that standpoint. I do believe they're going to start with Sam Howell because they're going to want to see what he's got. But I don't think it'll be too long before Ron Rivera makes the move to Brissett, because Brissett is a game manager. And I forget what the stat line was exactly last offseason. I crunched a bunch of numbers because I was in arguments with everybody about how Brissett could win games with the Browns better than the human Predator could, and I wasn't too far off. Like the Predator only won a couple of those games because of the defense. They didn't even score touchdowns in 2 of those games that they won. But anyhow, I digress. My point is, I feel like with the ownership situation the way it is, just like you guys have been saying, they're going to want that stability. They want that sounding board that's in the locker room, and they need Ron Rivera. Like, what a lot of people don't remember about Rivera from his time with the Panthers is this dude is genuinely a nice guy. Like, he's just a great person. Like, how do you fire or let go of a guy that the locker room loves when you already have all this turmoil? Like, you want to keep these guys happy as much as you can and make up for all the crap from the last ownership. And you're not going to do that by firing your head coach. So we're looking at him for at least another couple of seasons just to help form and mold all that. We're looking at a team that's potentially already going to be losing a ton of in-division games. So maybe tanking for Caleb or a better quarterback or however you want to word it, tanking, whatever. But that's what we're looking at. We're looking at this team that's going to be playing for a very high draft pick next season and then see what Rivera can do with that team after that. Because the rest of their team, they're not bad. They're just not good at just about any position.
Yeah,
I think they're remember too, Rivera he had a lot of success in Carolina. He was the head coach there for a long time. Went to Super Bowl. They were in the playoffs, like I'm guessing on average, like every other season probably. So they have a lot of success. He's got great experience, and like I said earlier, a lot of gravitas behind him. Like you would point out before, Jason, at some point they were like 7-5-1 and in control of their own destiny, and they wound up 8-8-1. So obviously the last month of the season they didn't play well, but they did get to 8-8-1. In a division that had 3 playoff teams. And I know they had at least one really good win against Dallas last year. They might have had another 1 or 2 surprising wins against some other good teams. I think there were a few times last season where I thought Washington was buried. You can bury the team. And they just seemed to have a big win and just kept going. And I think Ron Rivera was a big part of that. And like I said, I think the QB situation is, like most teams, is the key thing there. And we'll see. I think he's going to be around next year.
So I tend to agree. We'll vote here in a minute. The one thing that I found interesting, and the one thing that didn't play in his favor last year, they kept him on, so I guess it didn't matter, is going into week 18, he didn't realize they had already been eliminated. I don't know how, as a head coach, going into your last game, you don't realize what your playoff situation is. I read that in an article I was researching, when I found out that they were 7-5-1, going back and trying to see what led to them being 8-8-1. There was an article that they had talked to him about that they were already out, and he seemed surprised by it. So I don't know how, as a head coach in the NFL, you don't know you're eliminated going into the last week of the season. But he seemed to manage it. That's kind of like not knowing you can tie in the NFL as a quarterback, right? So,
but I'm very much a don't tell me the score type of person as well.
That's true. All right, we're gonna vote thumbs up for him staying, thumbs down for him leaving.
Rivera will be gone, and Cliff Kingsbury might take over as the coach next year.
Is he back from Thailand?
Singapore.
Oh, Singapore. There you go. No, so for those listening at home, the 3 of us had thumbs up. Rich had thumbs down. And so that's Ron Rivera. Last name on our list is Brandon Staley of the Los Angeles Chargers. Staley could have had his choice of jobs 2 years ago, coming from the defensive coordinator for the number 1 defense, the Rams, and probably chose Chargers in part because the team had a loaded roster, plenty of cap space, and Justin Herbert as an upcoming star. The Chargers spent that cap space on all-pro pass rusher Khalil Mack and signed Pro Bowl cornerback J.C. Jackson. Despite the big offseason acquisitions, the Chargers started 6-6. Then they won 4 games straight, some people saying they were the best team in the NFL. Staley's decisions as a head coach have been questioned, and in Week 18, that one of his decisions to play his starters in a game that had no impact on the standings or playoff seeding, he took more heat when the often injured Mike Williams injured his back, keeping him out for the playoffs. The Chargers look poised to go to the second round of the playoffs against the Jaguars until they choked away a 27-0 lead. Now, Kellen Moore was brought in to help this offense in Los Angeles. Do you guys think that will be enough to make the Chargers a playoff team in the AFC, or do you think the success of the offense will cause for fans to call Moore to be the head coach? Because Staley is very much disliked. AFC West, Rich, I'm gonna go with you because that's your division as a Raiders fan.
Yeah, I think them bringing in Kellen Moore was actually a pretty great move. I mean, bringing an offensive coordinator like him, obviously Staley is a defensive-minded kind of coach, so I think it plays well into them actually going into the playoffs, having a good season and everything. As much as I hate saying that and everything, I think this turns around this team, and maybe that's what they needed and everything to take that next step. I think they compete with the Chiefs. I think they're competing for them in that first overall division and stuff like that. I really think this is a big game changer for them. And I wish my Raiders will be there competing with them. Let's wait and see. Yeah, I think they do enough, especially with this move, bringing him as the offensive coordinator. He keeps his job.
Hope springs eternal for Rich and the Raiders. I'm going to stick with an AFC fan. Justin, what do you got here on the Chargers? Do you think Kellen Moore helps there? Do you think they've done enough on offense not to give up 27-0? Like Rich said, Staley is a defensive-minded coach, but that Jaguars team picked him apart in the second half.
Yeah, and I feel like the wrong teams tend to pick them apart at the wrong time. He doesn't seem like a very consistent head coach either. I mean, a lot of inconsistencies, but also this division is it's going to be tough to win for as long as Pat Mahomes is there and Andy Reid is there and even Kelsey. And I know even after Kelsey leaves, that team is still going to be incredibly good because they have Pat Mahomes. Like he's a cheat code there, right? So no matter what the expectations are for the Chargers, it almost seems like they're always going to fall a little bit short. And maybe they need that extra juice. Maybe they need that extra bump. I'm not sure that firing the head coach is the answer. But at the same time, he has made a lot of bonehead mistakes, and it's always at the end of the season or it's always at the end of the game. It's in crunch time. It's when it matters. So even with a winning record and even with making it to the playoffs, there's still a chance if he makes that one bonehead decision again that cost his team that he's going to be gone. So I think it's his bonehead decision making and not so much his actual coaching ability. That's going to keep him on the hot seat. So I'll save my vote for the end, though.
So, Joe, I think something that gets overlooked here is that Herbert got hurt early in the season last year on a primetime game against the Chiefs. Hurt his back and ribs, right? And he played through it, but I think he had a stretch there where he didn't play very well. You also had, injuries to Mike Williams, as we discussed, injuries to Keenan Allen, which is becoming more and more regular. I think that is more of what got them to that 6-6 record than maybe some bad coaching decisions, at least early in the season. With a healthy Herbert, they rattled off 4 straight. Which do you think this team is more? Which do you think this team is more likely to repeat, the 6-6 or that 4 straight?
Is that question for
That's
me?
to you, Joe. Yep.
Okay. I think the 4 straight. I think they're going to have if they're healthy, and that's been a huge question mark with their wide receivers for a long time, and Justin Herbert too. But they've had key injuries. They've been injuries to key players at key times for like year in and year out. It seems like, but the team is very, very talented, and I do think it's been the head coach that's been holding them back, along with the injuries too. But remember, 2 years ago, I think his rookie year as a head coach, a lot of boneheaded moves that might have even cost him a playoff spot, if I recall correctly. And then last year, a lot of it was injuries. But man, that playoff game against the Jaguars, like that could be like a career killer for him in Los Angeles, where if they don't have a good season and make it at least to like the second round of the playoffs this year, there's too much talent on that team to be messing around. There's way too much talent on that team to be saying, okay, we're going to go. If they make it in the playoffs, they lose the first round again. Okay, we'll just bring back Staley and go in for his fourth year as head coach. There's too much talent for that. And maybe there'll be like a good experienced head coach out there who could take over or something. But there's no way in heck they got to have a really good year like we expect them to, given their talent and their quarterback, and win a playoff game, and then he'll be back, and I think they'll do that. But when I saw you had this list and I saw the list earlier, that was the number one name on my list on my dartboard was Staley. I don't like him at all. I don't. I think he's a fool. I think he's a horrible head coach. I don't trust him for anything. And I think they're, in spite of him, they will have a very good season and they will win a playoff game because they're that talented if they stay healthy. But I think he's an idiot.
I think what you're saying is he would benefit, and nice harsh words there from Joe. I think he would benefit from a nice assistant that would tell him, could walk up and tell him, "Hey, you're doing the wrong thing here. Maybe dial this back," because he's considered one of those guys that's ruled by analytics. But I think he's
hence all the 2-point conversions he was consistently going for his rookie year that cost them games.
Yeah,
that cost them games.
Yeah, I think so.
No, it wasn't just a 2-point. I'm sorry. I think it was consistent. Was he going for a fourth downs
and
as well? Whatever. The dude is cement shoes on this organization, so they'll win in spite of him. They're not winning the Super Bowl with him, but they'll have a winning record in spite of that fool.
Hey, Jason, real quick, I wanted to say, because you kind of said it. Look, analytics is taking over the NFL, and if you want to pick two teams, two coaches that are really analytic driven, is say Philadelphia Eagles and the Chargers. The difference between the two teams is Philadelphia, every time they go with analytics, it works for them. Where with Staley, every time he goes with analytics, it doesn't work for him. As good as this offense is and everything, all of a sudden there could be a change where everything analytics that's telling him to do what he wants to do, they're going to work for him this year. So that's my take on it and stuff like that. He's big on analytics, just like the Eagles with their 2-point, always going for it on fourth down, that 1 yard scrimmage run that they always do and everything.
Well, so the difference between the two is one guy calls good plays when he makes analytical decision, and the other guy's Staley. So,
also there's a lot to be said about analytics going in your favor when you have Jalen Hurts at the 2-yard line, or you only need 1 or 2 yards. You have Jalen Hurts. That's not coaching. That's just let's run the Jalen Hurts play that everybody knows we're going to run, but it's still going to work because the dude squats 650 pounds.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's plays, it's personnel, it's all of that. And to Joe's point, they're a very talented team, which is why a guy who made the playoffs is on a hot seat, because when you have Austin Eckler and Mike Williams and Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert, and the list goes on, and that defense, and to Joe's point too, if he got fired at the end of the season, this probably is that was probably his last game as head coach ever, because you lose a 27-0 as your last game as a head coach in the NFL, it's going to be hard for you to get another NFL head coaching job. I think the Chargers did him a big favor, because even if he loses his job after this season for just being mediocre, the last thing people think about him won't be that 20-7 lead he gave up. So the Chargers are doing him a huge favor here.
Yeah, you can't lose a game like that to the Jaguars. And I like that. And I'm not taking anything away from the Jaguars. They were a good up and coming upstart team who had who earned everything they had. You're going to lose like that. It's got to be to the Chiefs, or say like the Eagles if you're in the NFC. You can't lose like that to the Jaguars when you are as talented as the Jaguars are. They're not as talented as the Chargers. The Chargers have, they've been in the playoff hunt. They've been there. There was just no excuse for that. And that's not. Hey man, that's not the offense. That was the defense. Isn't Staley some defensive genius we're told about?
With a good, with the good defensive players.
Offense is good. Yeah, with good defensive players. Well, didn't look like a genius there.
All right, so that was the 5 that I had on my list. I talked to these guys about possibly some guys on the outside of that 5 looking in, because this year we replaced 5 head coaches. Last year I think there were 10. So there's always guys on the fringe that could get fired as well. I'm going to go straight to Justin because I like the one that he mentioned. Now, I'm sorry, guys. We got to vote. Before we do that, we got to vote. Staley, is he staying or going? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
Kellen Moore saves his job.
And I agree with Rich. Kellen Moore saves his job. But I'm going to say Joe's got 2 thumbs down. And Justin's got a thumbs down. So that's 3-2. Rich and I lose. Joe that's as strong of comments I've ever heard from Joe about anything.
Joe loves everybody.
That's passion. That's passionate hate from Joe, from a team that's not even in his division.
He's been talking to Nate because that's how strongly how Nate feels about him too.
That guy is cement shoes for this organization.
Joe had 65 players in his top 10 favorites going into the draft from college football.
That's true. It's actually true. All right.
There's only one 101, and that's Darnell Washington.
Joe, hey, I got him in a dynasty in the 4th round, I believe, just for you, Joey.
Joe loves those people that people say only your mom could love. That's Joe. Anyway,
only Joe could love.
Only Joe could love. Justin had an interesting name. Now, I don't necessarily agree with it, but I do want to hear the rationale. Justin, why don't you mention your guy on the outside of this list looking in?
My guy on the outside looking in is Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin hasn't really done a huge amount with that team since losing Ben Roethlisberger. As a matter of fact, he hasn't done anywhere near what Bill Cowher did in his 14 years. And now Tomlin's been there for 16 years. And in the last 6 years, they've only made it to the AFC. It's been 6 years since they've made it to the AFC Championship game. Unlike my example with Tampa Bay earlier, Pittsburgh is a town that is used to succeeding in football. Pittsburgh is a town that is always at least in the hunt or always fighting for not just the conference title, but they always feel like they have a shot at a real playoff run. I'm not confident that Mike Tomlin's going to be able to do that, even with this young team that they're trying to form and grow. The defense is what's going to carry them. I don't think it's necessarily that Mike Tomlin is a bad coach by any means. He like I said, 16 years, he's never had a losing record. The dude is obviously a really good coach. But sometimes we've seen this. We've seen the teams move on from a good coach because it was just time. Like at a certain point, you've got to move on. You've got to change something. You've got to shake something up.
Coughlin.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I mean, I know it's a little bit different because he retired because of his age, but actually Bill Cowher would have been another good example. Like he was just ready to retire, but I feel like had he stuck around a couple more seasons, they would have had to make a really tough choice. There's a lot of coaches out there like that though that have been fired after 1 or 2 not so great seasons just because the ownership felt it was time for a change. And that's kind of where I'm leaning with this. They finished 3rd in the AFC North. And I get in years past, the AFC North hasn't always been as strong as it is right now, especially with the Bengals coming around the last few years. But 3rd place is not something that tastes good in the mouth of the Steeler ownership.
So I do agree that. So if it were me running a franchise, I think what Mike Tomlin's doing there has gotten stale. And the NFL is slowly starting to move on past what Mike Tomlin is capable of doing in Pittsburgh. Aside from getting a dynamic quarterback and some really great weapons that can make any coach look pretty good. I mean, look what Herbert does with Staley. Aside from something like that, I think they are doomed to mediocrity going forward because I think Tomlin does a really good job at what he does. And he builds, we talked about with Ron Rivera, building like a solid foundation and a good core with good people and good players. And Tomlin will give you that going forward from now until forever. That ownership group is also super loyal and they stick with coaches for a long time. We talked about Cowher, who did have some losing seasons in there, and there was pressure maybe that the game had passed him by and they stuck with him. And look what he did, towards the end. He got him back Super Bowl into the playoffs, the whole thing. So having said all that, I don't think he's on the hot seat. I don't think they're going to get rid of him. But I definitely see the reasons behind you saying it, and I think it might be an okay thing for Pittsburgh to actually do it. Joe?
Oh, I think Tomlin's as safe as any head coach out there. Maybe not named Andy Reid. I mean, he's a very good head coach. Listen, the Steelers have had for a long time. Have had an excellent run, but there are times where you have to kind of like reload, and that's what they've had to do. Remember, like they lost a lot of talent like over the previous few years with Roethlisberger getting old and retiring, Antonio Brown going crazy, Le'Veon Bell when they he didn't sign his he left the Steelers. They've lost a lot of talent, and even last year, like I think they wound up with a winning record, like right, I think like 9-8 or something like that, and that was after not a great season, but they finally got their two best defensive players, who are two of the best in the league, back from being injured, and Minka Fitzpatrick and Watt, and they won on a nice streak the second half of the year, and they became relevant. And it's a young quarterback they're playing with. I do think they've done a nice job of restocking up on their offense, and I think the Steelers are going to surprise this year. I believe in Tomlin, I really do, and I don't think, unless barring some crazy collapse this year, which I just don't see happening. Even if they don't make the playoffs, I think if everything seems to be trending in the right direction, I think I've got no doubt that Tomlin will be back next year and the year after that too. I think the team just kind of needed to rebuild, kind of like a next generation Steelers, and I think that's what they're doing. I think they're doing a good job of it too.
Rich?
Yeah, so when I saw this mention in the Gilded chat from our friend over here, Omar Khan is their new GM, and there's NFL teams out there that when they do drafts, sometimes the coaches don't have no decision on the picks they're making. It's the scouting team and who's the GM making those calls and everything. A prime example is like Andy Reid. Andy Reid doesn't make the call on who they draft. He takes who they draft and he makes them work. And I think the Steelers, if I remember correctly, Tomlin's the same way. He hasn't been one of the people that they don't truly get his input on who they're draft. He's going to take who they got and they're going to go after it. This was actually the first year, if I remember correctly, that Tomlin had a say so on some of these picks this year and stuff like that because of the new GM. He's wanting to take the old way of the Steelers and do something different and everything to change the way they do things. And you can see it the way they drafted this year. In that reasoning alone is why I don't think he's fine. I mean, I think him and Khan, they're two peas in a pod, and they're gonna change some things up. And just like what Joe said, they're gonna surprise some teams.
And they drafted the human cheat code, Darnell Washington.
All right, guys. I had another name, but everybody here said that he was going to stay, so we're going to ignore that one because we're now at 1 hour and 8 minutes. It's a little longer than we wanted to go tonight. So with that, guys, first I want to thank Rich, Joe, and Justin for coming on tonight, being on Sunday Night Live. I know if you guys are late night TV show hosts, you're watching reruns. We're not doing reruns here on Toilets Titles. I do again want to mention, if you're watching us on YouTube, to like and subscribe. If you're listening to us on the podcast, go give us a review, give us the 5-star review, and make sure that you check out all of our other shows. We have shows basically every night of the week, and we're doubling up because we have so much content. Not to mention College Football Nation. Like, there's just so much going on for Toilets Titles. Go to toiletstitles.com. You can check out everything we're doing, including the articles. Patreon.com/Toilets Titles. Get in there, get into our Patreon, get into the Gilded chat. Thank you, Justin. We are doing more and more every single day. Again, we've got a Rams show with Shay coming up on Wednesdays. I think Joe said he's putting it out. Like, we are doing more and more and more. And not to mention when fantasy football kicks, like, this is a general NFL show. But we do fantasy football is some of the bread and butter, right? During the NFL season, we're going to be doing Sunday night or Sunday morning shows again, doing live at start sit advice. We do that every Sunday. So we do shows about everything NFL and college football, and we're going to be right here for you. Like I said, we bend what we do to make sense to what's good so that the shows are good for you. So with that, again, I want to say thank you to all the guys for coming on. I want to thank you guys for listening and watching. And guys, we will see you next time.
Take care, all.